we have someone, realistic, see what's realistic nihilist, that wants to discuss miracles with you. So
Sure.
if you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question, realistic nihilist.
Um, it's not so much a question. It's more of I would forward a proposition. The questions I had were more with regard to some things that Matt said on the YouTube channel. But if you want to discuss miracles, what I understand a miracle to be is a violation of unviolable natural laws, right? That is to say, God goes in. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So God goes in and he breaks the laws of nature, right? And does what he wills. And so that's what I understand a miracle to be.
Do you know if that's a correct definition or not?
Well, I'm not. If you want to provide a different definition, we can scrutinize that one.
Well, you know, we know that God does things that are, we call them miracles, but why are they miracles? Because they're beyond our ability and scope to do and to accomplish. They're beyond what we understand. If you and I were to go back with a flashlight 2,000 years ago, it's a miracle in our hand, right?
Well, I don't think the idea is that what warrants calling something a miracle, because we know flashlights are natural phenomena. People who don't know, maybe they'll call it a miracle, but what warrants that when it's actually not a miracle?
Because their level of knowledge of physics would say that's a miraculous thing you have in your hand. Okay, fine. Let's just put it up to now. If God exists and he is one who invented the universe, every law that's embedded in it, he has privy to. If he wants to regenerate a person and have someone walk on water, what's the big deal? For him, it's not miraculous. For him, it's every day.
I don't
for
think
us, it'd be miraculous.
It'd be miraculous, right? Because the definition of miracle that you forwarded could just as well be a natural phenomenon that we don't have an explanation for.
But it's at the command of God. I suspect that they're going to be.
So how would you know the difference between a miracle and some unexplained phenomena that you simply don't have an explanation?
Oh, no. I'm just saying, how do you know that isn't what a miracle is from the relationship of God? How do you know he doesn't have access to certain natural laws that we don't? And that's what we perceive as a miracle. I'm just saying, how do you know that isn't the case? When you say, how would I be able to tell the difference? I don't know all the physical laws, so I wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Well, I'm just calling into question what the meaning of the word miracle is, because it doesn't seem
That's
to
a good
me
question, though.
that it means anything, right? To me, it could be just as well that it's a natural phenomenon, right? And that takes all of the locution out of the claim that it's a miracle.
But laws, it's okay. The miraculous would occur here, as I mentioned earlier, when it is at the beck and call of someone like God, who has a control over those things. It'd be miraculous in his sense. For example, Jesus walked on water. We know gravity, water viscosity, displacement. We know the problems. We can do the math. It's not going to work. When God does what he does something by the power of his exertion of his will in our world. I don't know if he's accessing the 27th dimension and making a little plane of 20th dimensional whatever so Jesus can walk on it. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if he's just exerting energy and walking. I don't know. But all of these would be natural to him. So when we look about miracles, from our perspective, a miracle is something that is so unnatural to us and so improbable to us, we exclaim, that's a miracle. To God, he might be saying, no, that's not that big a deal. Look, I can do this all the time. So from whose perspective? So
What I'm saying is it's not a perspectival thing. If you're just saying,
yes, it is.
Well, then you might as well be a naturalist, right? If every miracle could be a natural phenomenon, then you might as well be a naturalist.
Except that a naturalist is also a determinist in this sense, because naturalism simply says when something has the necessary preconditions to occur, it will automatically occur. There's no volition in it. The issue of the miracles has to do with volition as well. It's under the beck and call of God. It's the third time I'm mentioning this. And the issue of God being able to do what he wants, when he wants, the way he wants, for what he wants to accomplish. That's when we call it a miracle.
But then everything's a miracle because presumably God wills existence. So then a miracle is just
Good for you. I would think that
the
you're on the
claim,
right track to becoming a Christian.
right? But the claim that it's a miracle is just vacuous. Then
No, not necessarily.
it just
Because
doesn't mean anything.
I'm just postulating what I think it might be. When people say miracles can't happen, how do you know? And then first, what do we define a miracle as being? It's a tough question because a miracle to us isn't a miracle to God. A miracle to us is something we can't do, but God can. Then if you say, well, let's expand the view of naturalism to include God, well, no, that's not what naturalism is. Naturalism is restricted to the physical realm. God is outside the physical realm, but can control the physical realm.
Well, God
It's his
could be,
volition that certain events occur.
but you already said it, right? God could be using physical means that we don't
Could
understand.
be. I don't know if he is.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, when you come into an unexplained phenomena, why would you call it a miracle rather than an unexplained phenomena?
Well, that's what I call it, an unexplained phenomena.
Okay. So,
That's what I
so
call it,
a miracle just
unexplained.
is supposed to be something that God intends to bring about?
Well, okay, let me give you an example of something here. Let's say my wife, this is for real, I'll type it in. She has this condition, SMADS 3. Don't ask me what it means, but it's more rare than rare, and it's a connective tissue disorder, and I can go and bore you. Okay, but she's been scientifically examined, genetics, and all this stuff. It's so rare that a hospital in Salt Lake City took her
Maybe she's
and all of her
lying.
brothers. What?
Atheists are going to say she's lying.
Yeah, she's lying. And we don't have the documents to prove it, but anyway. So it's called SMADS 3. We used to think she had Marfan syndrome, but it's actually SMADS 3. That's what they told us. And it was so rare that when they found, get this, when they found all 5 of the siblings, she has two older brothers, 2 younger brothers. They found all 5. They said, we want to test all of you, do extensive tests, all for free. That's how rare it was. But anyway, okay. So let's just say that I'm praying for her, and I have prayed for her to be healed from this. It affects her heart, her back, her joints. She is so flexible because her joints don't really work as well as they need to. She can take handcuffs, and she was arrested once for anti-abortion stuff, and she can take her wrist and just collapse them, and the handcuffs just come off. She can lay flat on the ground with her back of her knees on the carpet and her butt on the carpet, and take her toes and just touch her toes to the ground, flat down. That's how flexible she is. Okay. What if I were to pray and say, Lord, and I prayed publicly here, heal, my wife's name is Anique, it's a French name, heal Anique of her SMADS 3. And she's sitting over there, and she starts feeling really warm all over in her body. I turn the camera on her, and we're watching her, and she's not feeling well. Okay, and then she feels different, she's warm all over her body. And then a year later, we find out for follow-up tests, she doesn't have SMADS 3 anymore. All right, is that a miracle?
Well, on your definition, everything is a miracle. If she had SMAD 3, it would be a miracle. If she didn't have SMAD 3, it would be a miracle.
No, that's not my definition. Would that unusual thing
that God wills, right, is a miracle? And
no, I didn't say that.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood you. You said any intentional action taken by God that God wills into existence. Right.
No, that's not what I said. But
Sure.
SMADS 3 is actually a genetic thing. It's on the genetic level. That means your genes have to be, DNA had to be altered. Let's say that was done. What would you say? If something like that happened, would you say it was a miracle? Out of the ordinary, extraordinary, prayed.
I would just call it an unexplained phenomenon.
Okay. And what if you were watching when I praying in the name of Jesus and this happened?
Well, I mean, I would just call it an unexplained phenomenon unless we have a mechanism that explains it, right?
God explains it. It's a perfect explanatory mechanism.
Why wouldn't I don't think it's necessarily.
But it's a good explanation.
Can I ask a question, realistic nihilist? Do you accept only scientific methods for examination?
I don't understand the question. Can you be more specific?
Well, you're arguing for that we have to have a scientific evidence for things. Do you accept any other type of evidence?
Well, I guess if you're being loose with the term evidence and you just mean justification for a belief, then yeah, I accept rationalist justifications for belief, yeah.
Okay, so I guess what I'm trying to get to is, can you scientifically prove George Washington lived?
I think there's probably a lot of evidence that George Washington lived, yeah.
But it wouldn't be scientific.
Yeah, it would be
Historical.
Historical, yeah, it makes certain predictions. George Washington's life makes certain predictions, and then from those predictions you make observations in the world, and if those observations come true, then that's confirmation of the hypothesis that George Washington existed, yeah.
But
So
you wouldn't use science to prove it. You'd use a different method called history.
no, well, history is science, right?
It's a branch. It's a branch specifically known as history, where when you're arguing for the science of the natural world to try to prove something that's supernatural, non-material. Let me ask it this way: could you tell me how many feet 8 gallons of water weigh?
Well, I heard you have this discussion last week, and no, I don't think you can.
You can't. It's the wrong measurement. And trying to use science, the study of the natural world, to explain something that's immaterial, not natural, is the wrong measurement.
Well,
you need to use the right measurement if you're going to have the discussion on what you want to
do. I don't really understand what the right measurement is. What is the right measurement?
God. It would
well,
be.
That's just begging the question, right? The thing that's supposed to be demonstrated is immateriality, and you can't just say, "Well, I'm going to use immateriality to demonstrate immateriality." That's the very thing that's supposed to be being argued for.
So
that's
God.
what you do in science.
What's that?
Sorry. You do that in science. You presuppose the validity of the laws of logic, the uniformity of nature, and presuppose certain things, the intangibles. Yeah. That's
fine. I don't see how that's relevant, right? The thing to be.
It's begging the question.
Well, I'm not begging the question. If you don't presuppose those things, that's fine. I don't think there's anything that I could do to convince you otherwise. Right?
But the presuppositions, what worldview accounts for the presuppositions? An atheist worldview doesn't. It just begs the question.
I don't understand how what an atheist worldview is. Atheism is a proposition.
It's a view of the world without God.
Right. It's just a proposition. There are several worldviews without God. Right. There are several atheistic worldviews. So when you say
just a proposition?
Yeah, atheism is a proposition.
Okay, so write out the proposition.
Well, the proposition, depending on how you want to phrase it, is either God does not exist, or there is no warrant to believe in God.
Which one would you prefer? Because atheists differ.
Depends on the God claim. I think the God of classical theism is incoherent and therefore does not exist.
Well, I'm a Christian, so I'm only arguing for the Christian God.
Right.
So what's your definition of atheism now?
Well, I think on that God claim, God does not exist.
Okay. So the Christian God does not exist.
That's true.
And how do you know that?
Because it's incoherent.
How's it incoherent?
Well, through various arguments, because supposedly...
Give me one.
Okay, well, just the omnipotence paradox is an example of a simple argument.
How's that?
Well, if an omnipotent being truly exists, then he should be able to accomplish possible things, yet it's a possible thing to create an unliftable stone, yet a deity can't accomplish that, therefore the deity doesn't exist.
Oh, so you offer a self-refuting statement to refute omnipotence.
I don't understand how it's self-refuting.
Okay, you believe in logic, right? Okay, so that kind of thing is, can God make a rock so big he can't lift it up, right? That kind of argument?
Yeah.
It's a logical non sequitur.
How is it non sequitur?
What's a rock?
A rock is a spatially extended object.
How big?
I don't know, varying sizes.
Is a mountain a rock?
I mean, I suppose so. I suppose it's a...
Well, then, if it's the same thing, then what's the differentiation between a rock and a mountain? I'm going somewhere with it.
Well, if you can if you want to be a little bit more charitable in understanding the argument, I just said an
I do
unliftable.
understand the argument. I'm trying to show you that your argument doesn't make any sense, that your incoherence problem
let
is
me
itself incoherent.
let me
Because if you can say a
explain.
rock you can't believe, what's a rock? A rock is a smaller segment of a larger body.
May
If
I
to make a
please,
rock so big you can't pick it up, then it would have to be bigger than the universe, which wouldn't be a rock anymore.
may I please explain the objection? Okay.
I thought you did.
No, I didn't. You
Go ahead.
took it and you went like out in outer space with it, and you didn't represent my argument, right?
Okay, what's your argument?
When we want to call something liftable, let's just call it liftable with respect to the Earth. So that means a finite mass of stone that's on the Earth that cannot be moved with respect to the Earth, right? This is, of course, logically possible because you don't derive a contradiction simply from the premises. And so it's a logically possible action that God ought to be able to do if he is, in fact, omnipotent.
Can God make a round square?
No, that's logically incoherent.
Oh, so, but it's logically consistent to limit this challenge just to Earth.
Why, I don't, what's incoherent about that? Where's the contradiction? I can demonstrate the contradiction in a square.
Are there
circle.
planets out there bigger than Earth?
What's that?
Because God expands the universe. He's bigger than the universe. I mean, he's going to make a rock so big you can't lift it up. The rock is material. The universe is smaller in size than him because by scope. So how's that not a circle square problem?
Well, presumably Jesus existed as fully God, right? Maybe God could make a man-sized being inside the material of the universe that he couldn't lift.
If God created the universe, then he's bigger than it. He extends beyond it. He's not limited to it. A rock, by definition, is materialistic, and so therefore, it's a non sequitur to say of rock you can't lift up because it just doesn't make any sense. It's a round square problem.
Well, does Jesus have the ability to walk on water? You guys were using that.
Yes,
earlier.
He does, and that was recorded by the eyewitnesses.
By your conditions, that's a non sequitur because he doesn't. He's immaterial being, therefore he can't walk on water, right?
What? Wait. Look, I just tore your argument apart. You jumped ship, and you went to Jesus walking on water.
No, I was just explaining to you analogically the type of reasoning you're using.
You were not.
Yeah, I was. I was just explaining. I was just drawing an analogy to say,
you said omnipotence.
Then it shouldn't be a problem in this case as well.
You said omnipotence. You're saying why God can't be because of the omnipotent problem. I just showed you that your example doesn't work. That you go to Jesus walking on water. Stick with the omnipotence thing.
You didn't create a problem for the omnipotence paradox. You just declared by fiat that that's an impossible action because you said so. But there's no contradiction.
Wait a minute.
Derive a contradiction.
Yeah.
For a minute. Let me just explain it, right? You can't derive a contradiction from a being lifting a stone. That's it, right? That's the contradiction. There's no contradiction in that statement. Can a being not lift a stone? Presumably, I cannot lift certain stones, right? Certain stones are beyond my scope of lifting, right? So that's it's logically possible that I can't lift a certain size of rock or a certain, type of rock. So the question is whether or not God can create such a rock.
Okay.
And that's just one argument, right? There are several others.
That's what the atheists are coming up with. A rock, a large mass of stone forming a hill, cliff, promontory, or the like, geology, mineral matter of variable composition, consolidated or unconsolidated, stone in the mass, a stone of any size.
It doesn't have to, it's not really relevant whether it's a rock or if it's a fucking toad. Can God create a toad that he can't lift?
Please watch your language, all right, if you're going to stay on, because I will boot for that.
Yeah. All right, I apologize.
Toad, any of various tailless amphibians. Okay, let's stick with the toad.
Sure.
Okay, all right. So, do you know of any tailless amphibians that are larger than the universe? Just curious.
I don't understand the premise that it has to be larger than the universe. The
Christian God created the universe.
Sure.
The universe has rocks in it, toads in it.
Fine.
To make a toad bigger than the universe, so he can't lift it up.
I don't understand the premise. You're sneaking in a premise.
May I jump in for a second?
I just about had him.
I'm sorry. Keep going. I apologize.
Okay. You see, the thing is, I mean, this whole thing is absurd. Lift. So God doesn't have spatiality, and he's supposed to exist in space, which is limited to the universe, which he's outside of, to lift something in relationship to what? Because lifting is in relationship to himself. But yet, he's everywhere. So how does he lift anything that's bigger than himself or they can't weigh when he's not located in one place?
Well, presumably Jesus was spatially extended, right?
Okay. Yeah, okay. I just, Sure. What were you going to say?
Doug, you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just that this argument was going in circles for quite some time. I was going to ask that we move on to another question because, I mean, it's an obvious thing to point out the fact that, the Christian God is immaterial and outside of the universe that He Himself created. Any object inside the universe that He Himself created is not, greater than God, so to speak, to where He cannot lift it. But
let's do this.
I would like to move on to another question, about atheism or Islam, at like the title of the.
What we're